And so after that absorbing first race in Bahrain, on to Saudi Arabia, to the Jeddah circuit. I say circuit, it is lots of straights, lots of fast S's, chicanes, high-speed braking, top speed's very important, engines therefore important, drag important, all that stuff. Are there any great corners on this circuit? I think if you include very high-speed blind S's where you've just got to make a commitment to a concrete wall in the hope that there's going to be nothing stopped in the middle of the S-bend. That requires bravery and commitment and everything else that we talk about with racing drivers. But in terms of finessey corners like turns 9, 10, or entry to Beckett's at Silverstone, or the S's at Suzuka, or I could go on, entry to the swimming pool at Monaco, entry to the top of the hill at Monaco. In terms of that sort of corner, not a lot of it in Saudi Arabia. So I think the logical conclusion from that is, I'll probably upset a few people here, but I think there's every reason, if they got a good set of tyres and the car's feeling good, there's every reason that certainly a George Russell will be closer to a Lewis Hamilton and maybe up with a Lewis Hamilton on a circuit like this. I think the same applies to a Carlos Sainz with a Charles Leclerc. And in both cases, of course, a Carlos or a George could beat their respective teammates. And for Sergio Perez, I think he'll be very near Max Verstappen as well on this sort of circuit. That's not to decry them too much, it's just that there aren't any great corners. So therefore, it is all about just getting the car right, working with the engineers on the telemetry, top speed versus drag, and everything else that comes into it. Of course, the precision in high-speed braking is a factor, and I would think that's probably the most finessey aspect of this circuit, and that's where probably a Lewis or a Charles or a Max will still have a slight advantage, just the way they get onto the brakes at very, very high speed. Something we saw very early on with Lewis in his Formula One career at McLaren, when in Canada with Fernando in the other car, Fernando bobbled slightly when he hit the brakes on his potential pole lap in Montreal and that high speed braking into the hairpin, whereas Lewis just got it absolutely right and got the pole. And it was from that moment onwards, interestingly enough, that Fernando said, nah, these brakes, these carbon industry brakes are no good, I've got to go to Hitco, which is what he'd been racing on at Renault. So yeah, I think that high-speed braking thing, it's more a question of will somebody like a George or a Carlos lock a wheel or do something under pressure at high-speed braking when it comes to qualifying. Having said all of that, we saw both Ferraris touch the wall today in the fast S-bend, aforementioned fast S-bend, which precluded either of them doing any long fuel runs, which is rather strange. So we haven't seen any fuel runs from Ferrari today. So everything you see in terms of times out there on the internet, bear in mind that we haven't yet seen Ferrari with fuel. No reason to think they won't be super quick. Of course they will. But I know Charles was very upset with himself when he just brushed the wall. Didn't appear to do a lot of damage, but he said, no, the car is broken. Came back into the pits in the second session. And then shortly afterwards, Carlos, who obviously at that point Ferrari were relying on to get some data, hit the wall on the other side, ran wide and hit the wall. So yeah, an interesting day for Ferrari, you could say, after their great performance in Bahrain. The other function of that is that when a lot of the teams were out, and particularly Lewis and Max were out doing long runs in the morning with fuel in the car, so in the morning, the afternoon, Ferrari didn't do that because they went out very late. They sort of had this sort of, we won the previous race prerogative of let everybody else clean the dirty track, and they stayed in the garage for quite a long time. So they went out and they did their runs, softs and mediums, but they didn't actually put fuel in the car. So that caught up with them in the second session. So there's a little bit of, I don't know, overconfidence perhaps, maybe, I don't know. Let's have a look at the times anyway, because it is a sort of, I can't get into too much else apart from just looking at data. So let's have a look at the long runs in FP1 this morning on the soft tyre, which seemed to go a long way. It seemed pretty hard. I thought we'd put up there Max versus Lewis just to see where Mercedes are on this circuit. Obviously, they're trying to trim the car as much as possible. Obviously, they've got as trimmed a wing as they can. They've got a sort of, fairly small wing on the car now. And here, I got to say, on these long runs, I don't think Lewis is that far off the pace. Yeah, he's off the pace, but he's not as much off the pace as you would imagine given the way Bahrain looked. I know it doesn't look too great if you just take that out of the bag just like that. But Max 36.2, 35.9, 35.5, and Lewis 35.7, admittedly on his second lap. And yeah, down on top speed on these long runs, but not massively down. A worse story, actually, is the top speeds from this morning. There you can see Sergio Perez, who's been unbelievably quick all day, 333 kilometers an hour. And he did that in the morning and the afternoon. Max 331, either running more wing. I would imagine they're running two different setups at Red Bull, because that was the pattern in both sessions. And then you see another Honda car, 328, Yuki Tsunoda. Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, that's what a Mercedes engine will do if it doesn't have a lot of downforce, i.e. not as much drag as a Mercedes. And then another Honda engine with Pierre Gasly. And finally, Valtteri Bottas right up there in the Alpha with the Ferrari engine. And this is the second half of FP1. You see there Charles Leclerc going out and pretty quick out of the box and pretty good in a straight line as well, although not quite as quick as the Honda 30.7 to Max's 30.8. 323 kilometers an hour in a straight line for Charles. Valtteri Bottas, again, very good. Didn't do much in the afternoon, but very good in FP1. Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, Tsunoda, Perez, and Lewis, you see 32.3 on a light fuel run. Not very encouraging from his point of view. It's also worth pointing out that right in the first run they did, when the track was pretty dusty and Ferrari was still in the garage, Max went out and did a 31.8 and 3.31 in a straight line on hard tyres, and Lewis was out on soft tyres early on, 32.9, so 1.1 seconds slower when the track was dusty and you needed a lot of confidence and you just got in the car just to see what things were like. Max immediately 1.1 seconds quicker than Lewis out of the box, so that is a pretty big advantage. And Lewis at the time, interestingly, was on the soft tyre. I don't think it made that much difference at that point. The fact that I don't think, you know, the relative performance of the soft and the hard. So that was that. And then in the evening, when the lights came on, it was an interesting thing as well, because we had some more long runs. And you can see here on the medium tyre, they did long runs on the medium with fuel and without fuel, interestingly enough. These are the fuel runs. And these are the most significant, I think, of the day we've had, putting Ferrari's absence from this to one side. Max Verstappen 35.5. Look at the consistency, 35.5, 35.7, 35.0, 34.9, 36.8, 35.4, and he's doing 300, 312, depending, I guess, on a toe on that one. So he's around the sort of 300, 310 mark, I would say 305. And Lewis Hamilton, similarly consistent, and again, not that bad. I wouldn't say he's near, but he's not as bad as he is when the fuel is out of the car. Let's have a look at some of the other runs in the afternoon. This is the light fuel run on medium tyres in FP2 when they, this was the first run they did. Verstappen 30.2, 324 kilometers an hour. Charles 30.2, 325 kilometers an hour. Carlos Sainz 30.3. It's eye-watering, really, isn't it, how quick these guys are. Sergio Perez 30.3, which kind of bears out what I was saying about how near the teammates are and how this race will sort itself out of car after car after car in lines like the animals going into the arc. And I put in there P11, George Russell 31.5, and P12, Lewis Hamilton 31.7. And look at the difference in top speed. Interestingly, 320 is exactly the same top speed that Mercedes were doing at this circuit in 2021. So they've gone, you know, they've put a bit of weight on the car, they've got the new configuration, and they're doing the same top speed. Whereas Max Verstappen was doing 3.15, 3.17 at this circuit last year. Now look what he's doing. So you can see there, that's a graphic illustration, I think, of where Red Bull are at and how much downforce they've got without any increase in drag, really, it would appear. And they've obviously got a better engine. I mean, looking at that, you've got to start saying the trend is there. The Honda is a really good engine. The Ferrari is not far behind. And where is the Mercedes? You know, it's a bit of a worry from Mercedes' point of view. So this is the light fuel run. Max didn't actually run light fuel with soft tyres in the afternoon. Charles did. He went 0.2 quicker, which is why you see him at the top of the pages on the internet. And I say it doesn't take into account that he didn't do any of the long runs. Charles 30.0 looked really good in the car, actually. Looked fabulous in the car. But he did make his customary mistakes, but they don't matter, but that's all right. Nobody had a major one today. There were a few engine glitches. Kevin Magnussen had chronic sort of engine trouble. I don't know what it was in both sessions. Never really got going at all, which is a shame, you know, after everything had happened in Bahrain. And right at the end, Yuki Tsunoda said he'd lost his engine as well. but it's only Friday, so we shouldn't panic. So Leclerc 30.0, Max's 30.2 on the medium still made him second quickest, even amongst the soft tyre runs. Sergio Perez, likewise 30.3. Lewis did a 30.5 on the soft tyre, and that's half a second slower than Charles Leclerc, who you got to, I don't know, he's going to be, I don't know, maybe Max would have done a 29.8, maybe 28. So I mean, that's the difference. And again, quite a big difference in top speed consistently. Carlos Sainz 30.5, George Russell 30.6. And Lando looking pretty good. McLaren looked slightly better. There were moments when Daniel Ricciardo looked pretty good, and Lando a little bit better. But as I say, after Bahrain, they could only get better, really, couldn't they? Fernando Alonso seemed to spend quite a lot of time running hard tyres when everybody else is on mediums, so it was a little bit difficult to compare. But he did do a long run as well in the Alpine, and looked pretty quick at the end. And the Alfa Romeos again looking quite strong. So that's it really, a fairly perfunctory video in terms of there's nothing really dramatic happening at the moment other than to look at these times and say Red Bull still look really, really good. Ferrari didn't do a fuel run today, but they look quick nonetheless. And Mercedes better on fuel runs than they are on light fuel runs. And we saw lots of shots of both Mercedes bouncing very badly. It looks incredibly uncomfortable for the drivers. And not only there, Ferrari also had bouncing problems today, whereas it looked like Red Bull had a pretty seamless sort of day. But when they put fuel in the Mercedes, I guess no surprise here, the car seemed to be bouncing less when it was heavier. So I suppose that's something, but you know, it's not much, is it really? When you're, if you're a Mercedes fan, it's still a pretty big gulf there to everything else. So yeah, we'll see tomorrow. It's one of these circuits where it is all about chassis and tyre performance, getting in a good lap, high-speed braking. Again, tomorrow there will be a session in the afternoon, and then there'll be under lights qualifying, and of course the race will be under lights on Sunday as well. Final point about Red Bull, it looks like there was some sort of vapor lock that caused the dramas in the cars of Max and Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez presumably had a vapor lock and the engine just sort of stalled at that moment, and that caused the spin. And Max, a similar thing, it was not out of fuel. Well, it was out of fuel in the sense that it was a vapor lock. And the Pierre Gasly fire towards the end of the race was electric battery related, so we hear. So we did say, chatting to Scarbs in that video, that it looked like the fuel problem on the two Red Bulls was somehow related to the new regulations and some proprietary parts from Magneti Marelli, but it now looks that's not the case, and it was something to do with, you know, what can I say, the way they've got the fuel pump mounted in the Red Bull and heat or whatever, and no doubt they will have made mods for this weekend in that respect. So there we are, and that was Friday from Saudi Arabia. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.